Okay.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. I've been excited to talk about this. I've been passionate about UX forever and VR pretty much just as long. Um, so this talk will be about immersive UX designing for the virtual world. Um, my name's Kirk Membry. I've been in the UX field since 1995. Started way back when, pretty much at the dawn of the internet for what most people know, HTML, websites and that sort of internet, not the ARPANET. I was a graphic designer originally, then I got into multimedia design, became an information architect, UX designer, web developer, did a lot of IT work. Back in the day, you had to do a little of everything. And then over the years, it was like suddenly like, oh, I'm a UX designer. That didn't even have a name at the time, but that's what I've been doing all along. In 2006, I bought a camera specifically for shooting 360 panoramics. This was back in the QuickTime VR days. And uh, yeah, a fisheye lens I think was $900, and it was specific just for doing panoramics. Such a wide angle lens. It's 180 by 180 degrees, and I would shoot multiple pictures and stitch them together. So I did that for since then. I'm still doing that today, and I do a lot of virtual tours for web and mobile now for VR. I never considered it VR back in the day, but it was QuickTime VR was Apple's name for it, and that's what shows up on all the headsets now. So I'll take it. So I guess I've been working in VR since 2006. And fast forward to 2018, and I started really getting involved in VR development. Oculus had just launched the DK2, their development kit, and I got involved in that a few years earlier, just playing around with games and stuff, and really wanted to learn more. So a few years ago, I decided to really go all in and learn as much as I could. So I've gone through design boot camps, developer boot camps. I was a teaching facilitator for XR business and design classes. I know some of my students are in here. I see in the chat. And this year, I was also an XR industry mentor for a high school program in Dubai. So that was fun, teaching a bunch of high school kids about what the future of XR is and how can they get involved, and talking about future jobs like space pilot, things that would never be, they were fantasy as a kid. Now they're actually becoming reality. So it's pretty cool of where the whole technology world is going. Here's a picture of me up at the top of Mount Washington. If you've ever been up there, there's a triptych panoramic. It's like summer and winter. I shot those for the observatory. So if you've ever been up there and played with that, I'm the guy that did that. I'm responsible for that. So what is XR? XR is extended reality, and it's made up of a few things. The first of which is augmented reality. And in augmented reality, it's a digital information overlaid on a pass through to the real world. Devices like your tablet or your phone with a camera, or Microsoft HoloLens, like this particular device right here. So we're all used to holding our phones up and scanning. Pokemon Go is one of the earliest examples. It was not truly AR. It used more geolocation than anything, but it got people involved in that. On the right here, this is an example of an app that I was developing for a class, and this is about 2 weeks of testing and all of the data points loaded at once. So I was positioning cards in my office, just moving around to test how they anchor. And as I move around, you can see how they stay in place. And for whatever reason, they all loaded back up at once. So I had to shoot a video of it because I thought it was pretty funny. You'll also notice all of the cards are facing me. I have it set that no matter where I move, they rotate. So already jumping into the interaction side of things, the interface is always facing me, so I can't get behind the interface and not read it. It's always usable from wherever I am. The next part would be virtual reality, and this would be a completely 100% immersive, at least visually. So you put on a headset. We all know what the Oculus Rift, or now the Meta Quest, and all the different names for these. So a headset on your face, you can't see the outside world. You're completely immersed. You can look around. You're in a fantasy world. You're underwater. You're in space. You're wherever. The device has cameras on the corners, these little dots, and then they look down at the controllers and they can see an infrared pattern on those controllers, so they can track in space. They call it like a constellation. So as they move, they know where they are. The cameras are also looking through the room to see, to generate a point cloud of matching points to know where you are in the 3D space. So objects that use this, or items, devices that are using this right now, are the Meta Oculus Quest, the Vive Pro, the Vario VR3, and there's a ton more, Pico Neo, and a few others. These are all considered 6 degrees of freedom. 3 degrees was the old Oculus Go, so that was you could look right, left, up, and down, but if you sidestepped, the whole screen would slide with you. 6 degrees of freedom will allow you to step right. Oh, I'm sorry, just looking at the comments. 6 degrees of freedom will allow you to step to the right and the left, and that just that little additional motion makes your brain really think you're in that space. It eliminates a lot of the sickness and things like that. So 6 degrees of freedom is where it's at. That's what all of these devices can do now. They can map into a physical 3D space, and as you move around, that object stays fixed in that place. The last type is called mixed reality. Microsoft kind of coined that term, and it's a mix of the three. So you've got augmented reality and you have reality. So AR is actually between the two because you're seeing the pass through from a digital overlay onto reality through your camera or whatever. Or if you're wearing a headset, glasses like a Microsoft HoloLens, you're looking through it. Think of sunglasses, but then you have a little heads-up display inside. Virtual reality is completely enclosed, and mixed reality is kind of the combination of all of those. So picture a headset totally blocking your face, but the cameras can see out to the real world, and you can add digital information. So you could be in a fully immersed scene and then drop one wall down and see through to the real world. So that's considered mixed reality. But overall, mixed reality, augmented reality, and virtual reality, the new name for it is extended reality, or XR. Just like in the UX world, we have XR for, what is it now? Sorry, I'm forgetting what it is. So you have you have user experience and information architecture. You have all that stuff bundled up into one word, experience design. That's what I was trying to think of, XD. So there's XR and XD. Too many acronyms. I lose count after a while. But yeah, so that's, if you hear the term XR, the industry is trying to use that as the overall blanket term, but everybody still knows augmented reality and virtual reality. Not too many people know the term mixed reality. So which one is the best? Which one should we be using? It's the best tool for the job. Somebody was telling me a while back that in a training example, pre-field would be like using VR at home. You're training on your couch. You're learning how to repair an oil rig and do safety so that it doesn't catch fire, or how to put a fire out. You can train at home. You can practice and practice. You can catch fire. You can blow the thing up. Nobody gets hurt. You can train over and over, put lots of hours in. You learn it. You get the muscle memory of how that works. Now you go out into the field and you're really working on an oil rig or an oil derrick or wherever, if you're out in like Nebraska or something, or you're out in the Gulf of Mexico on an actual rig. Now you would either not use any headset and you have that knowledge from VR, or you could wear something like the Microsoft HoloLens, which lets you still have your hands, hands free to use wrenches and stuff like that. But then you can get little overlays explaining what to do and, fix this pipe, now turn this off and set this valve. So pre-field and in-field is a cool way to think about it. Training at home, even like a flight simulator, you could train at home with a headset. And then when you go to get into the real thing to do more training, you've already learned where all of those buttons are in an Airbus or something, whatever you're training for. So I like that term pre-field and in-field for the training world. But yeah, it's what tool do you need? I would not recommend wearing a headset while you're driving. Obviously, this guy's a passenger. Vario did have somebody drive with one on, but there was an engineer in the car, because if there's any latency, obviously that's going to be a disaster. But their headset has such a high resolution to it that they were able to pull that off on a controlled track. So where do we as designers fit in? Product design is really where it's at. You want to be able to build applications or games. Something most people don't think about is storytelling and also storyboarding. So storytelling, because most applications that we build are just web pages to retrieve data from a database, spit it back to the screen, have the user input something and save it back out. That's a lot of our standard enterprise applications that we've all probably built for insurance companies, medical, et cetera. When you get into virtual environments, there's more interactivity and more of stories to be told through games or training, because you were in this 3D space. So having some knowledge of that would be useful. and also being able to storyboard and do process flows and things. So I was working on a VR crane trainer for a class I was taking. So me being a UX architect, amongst many other hats that I wear, I have to go into Visio and immediately make a flow chart with logic and everything else like that. But doing this on paper, as we all know, is easier. And that way, when you get into development, you're not going to just mess up and waste everybody's time. Even for this hackathon that I'm going to be attending tomorrow, I'll probably make a user flow for whatever project we're working on, because that's just how I work, and it helps everybody understand what they need to do. This was one of my teammates he's a great illustrator, and he drew these up for an AR app we were working on. So he did some storyboards of how it all works. And this is helpful because you're trying to draw in a 3D space and it can be difficult. So this can make it a lot easier to kind of convey the idea. So what are the types of interfaces we can use? In 2D, we have flat or material design, your standard web design and mobile applications. You have buttons, you have targets, you have sliders. Here's a AR app I worked on. So you can see it has an aim bow and an exit game. So that's the overlay on the iPhone. You're going to take your finger and you're going to touch those points, but you're holding your phone camera up over the table. And these cards have a unique pattern on them that identifies and then the little figures appeared on those spots. So they're anchored, and as the camera moves, the perspective changes on that. So I'm just really working in this particular AR because it is an iPhone. It's just an overlay, and then the camera is the pass-through. This bottom one is a VR application. It's a 3D environment, but you can see on this deer skin, it's just a 2D interface. It's a standard slider and a button that we would use in any web application. So here I'm using a raycast to shoot that line out to hit that, and then I'm just dragging as if I'm clicking with a mouse. So that's the 2D interfaces. Even though it's in a 3D space, it's still a 2D flat interface. If you've ever had a chance to use a Microsoft HoloLens, you know how cool it is. If you haven't, now that COVID's kind of letting us get back together again, if you get the opportunity to try a HoloLens, definitely try it out. It is the coolest thing. So in the HoloLens, it maps out the 3D space, and we have these flat buttons. So again, just like a website, but they're floating in space, and then you can reach your finger up and press things. So again, that's 2D, but in 3D AR. The other type would be a 3D environment or a 3D interaction or button, which would be skeuomorphic, which we're all familiar with, which is mimicking real world objects. So VR is inherently the real world, even if it's a virtual world. So you're going to have buttons and levers and dials and keys and ropes and chains and boxes to push and pull and things to lift up. It's just everything you can pick up and interact with, you can do in VR, and you can throw things, and there's gravity and all of that. So you basically have to just build out real interfaces to the thing. So here's an example of a keypad. You're pressing all the buttons on it. And then at the bottom here, we have a physics lever. So you're grabbing that lever and you're pulling down, and it's acting like a real lever. Now, the trick is there's no resistance to it. You're reaching into midair and pretending that you're pulling a lever. So natural motion can be somewhat difficult. And what some companies have done, or some people who program things, they've gone in and they've made like a socket that it snaps to. So if you have a key and you're going to put it into a lock, as you bring it close to the lock may highlight. And when you bring the key in, it just jumps in automatically. And it's obviously not realistic, but it speeds up that process and makes it a bit easier, because you are just really just holding your hand in midair, and there's no tension, there's no feedback or anything as you're moving. So that's one way to improve if you have a really granular thing you're trying to do, like put a key into a little lock, you may want to make it have a snap point. Again, on the HoloLens for skeuomorphic design, it's a little bit different. So you have this 3D mug, but you have these pinch points. So they're not mimicking the real world because there isn't anything, but you're doing those behaviors as if you were truly grabbing little handles on either side of the mug, and you can pull and push. So again, you can have skeuomorphic in augmented reality. It's just that most designs are flat because they're on a iPhone. And on an iPhone, your finger is the interactor between, you, the screen, and the real thing. When you're wearing glasses, you can't put your fingers up behind the lenses to touch, so you have to do hand gestures out in front. So in that respect, it is more like VR. Typography is a big challenge in VR. Scale is really difficult because if you get your scale off even a little bit, you go from being a human to an ant or a giant, or something smaller than a human. The scale can be just a little bit off, and it's tricky. Like, what's a 16-point type look like when it's on a screen that's 5 feet from the viewer? We look at this here with the subway. This is a large sign. 2 people could fit down the stairs, so this is probably 8 to 10 feet wide, so it can be visible and readable from back further as you're walking up towards the subway station. The same thing in VR. You put that up on a thing and you move back 20, 30 feet. Now it's gotten smaller. So typefaces, yes, they are true to being, 16 point or, 20 point or 100 point, but you're going to have to play around with them to see what feels comfortable as you're moving in the space. It requires a lot of testing. You'll be putting your headset on and off constantly, and you want to prototype early and get the scale figured out before you start to build a very complex interaction or scenery or scene in general, because if you don't get that right, it's going to be a nightmare down the road, and you want to scale all of your objects accordingly. I have the back of the door in my office here. I have every half foot marked off with tape for when I was doing that card view to see, well, what's a comfortable height to put those cards off the floor. So I kept shooting, kept walking up to the door to show that, and then placing them at different heights to see, between 4 feet and 6 feet. When working in VR, I'll measure a desk that I'm sitting at or standing at, and then try to mimic the height. I'll make an object of that height, and then I'll scale the desk or whatever object I bring in down to that point and see how it feels to give it a natural feel, because it's very easy to get objects broken out of scale when you import them in from other places. People are modeling in something like Blender, and when they bring them in, the scale can be off. So getting that all dialed in correctly is important as you bring in each asset in order to make sure everything works. I know I'm talking about all this on typography, but it all matters. It's all very important. And small type is very hard to read on a headset because of the resolution. Things like the Vario have a very high resolution where you could actually read the spine on a CD by getting up close to it, whereas on the Oculus Quest, I don't think you'd be able to read that. But the resolution is improving on all of these devices every year, so hopefully next year we'll see some good stuff. Color is just like it is with websites. You want to follow standard accessibility practices with contrast. Be aware of what's in the interface. Especially in AR, you have no control over what the pass-through is. Here in my condo, I have kind of a tan wall, and you can see the light in the back in the living room. So when I was making this interface, we have words here of where you have what you have to do. And just by adding a little bit of a drop shadow behind it, I made those pop. It actually looks a lot better on the phone than it does here in this GIF animation. But without it, you couldn't see anything. But one of the other developers was in a darker apartment, so it looked perfect on her device. And then when I tried it on mine, it didn't work because I have a completely different environment. If you're playing Pokemon Go and you hold up towards the sky with clouds, or it's a high contrast day, with the overcast, it's just going to be washed out. And it's hard for the software. I don't know, maybe now they're starting to add the ability to detect what the scene is and compensate for that. But you want to put in stuff like, this is in the recording itself. This isn't part of the app, but you can see how it's been screened a little bit darker. You should think about things like that, like how can you make this more visible if it's light or dark? And you'll want to test against different environments, especially in AR, because of that pass-through. You want to see how does it react with light, with a bright window in a dark room, or outside, or facing towards dark bushes or something like that. You need to make sure it works in all of those environments. So with interaction design, we have a couple of different things we have to worry about. Up close, we have touch interaction, usually 1 to 2 feet. This is like arm's length or a little bit shorter than that. So when you're holding a phone, a book, or a tablet, they're all at a little bit of a different size, but it's usually like 1 to 2 feet approximately. And then you can touch and tap on things. As you get further out from that, you're looking at more what they call a 10-foot interface, which is what the media interfaces like Roku and Netflix and Hulu and everything. That's the sitting on a couch and you're 10 to 15 feet from your TV. So you need to interact with it. So fonts have to be larger, or typefaces, and you have to have you're going to be using a different type of control. Obviously, you'd be using a remote for Hulu, but for VR, you could do a raycast to shoot out there. If you were just doing hand tracking, unless you're shooting a ray from your hand, you'd physically have to get up and get closer to touch that object that's further away. So usually it's a raycast interaction where we're about 10 feet or so. 1 to 2 feet is close, and anything in between that, maybe you have to just walk forward a little bit to interact with it. You can't open a door down the hallway without getting up to it. So it's the same thing in VR. You have to get closer and then you can open it. And then you have the read only, which would be your street signs, highway signs, billboards. You're talking 20 feet and bigger. Highway signs are gigantic. My truck probably is the same length as this sign, 22 feet or something. And that's meant to be visible from miles away at high speed. I think it's 1 inch per 10 feet or something was one of the specs I was just reading about. So I have no idea how big these letters are, probably a couple of feet per letter. So in VR, it's the same thing. As you may not be building a scene that's 2 miles across, although you could. And game designers do this, right? They build huge worlds, but they usually don't have a billboard on top of the castle that's visible from the next town. You see the castle in the distance, and as you get closer, you can see things, and the signs are smaller. So you've got to think about where the user is and what they're going to be doing and how necessary it is. And if that big sign is necessary, or you have to inform them of something, you either put a giant billboard up or you think of another way to inform them to go there. Possibly if in an adventure game, there'd be a little signpost pointing to the castle, and then okay, I have to go that way for a couple miles. So think about what that interaction is, what the intent is from the user, and you want to support them accordingly. So we have grab interactions. It's not just all pointing and clicking. You can pick objects up, you can move them, you can throw them. This is mostly in VR because that's where you can interact with all of that stuff. AR that's on your phone, you don't really do any hand gestures. You tend to tap the screen and that's about it. I have not seen any AR apps that you can hold your hand out in front of your phone and do things. But if you get into AR 3D, which would be more like the Microsoft HoloLens or the the Magic Leap, then you would be doing gestures in space in order to grab and interact with objects, and you could pick up a virtual thing. Like if I use the IKEA application, I pick a couch and then I tap on the screen to place it and position it. But if I was using a HoloLens, if there was an IKEA app, I could physically go over and pick it up and move it and scale it. So you have to think about what the interaction is with the device that you're going to be working with. And if you're going to support multiple devices, now you have to build yet another interface because the phone is different from the HoloLens. One is a grab interaction, the other one's a tap interaction. So now you have to have 2 completely different ways of doing things. So in the interactions, I hope this comes through. This is kind of a dark scene here. I'm a Unity developer, so I work in C#. Unreal is the other 3D engine that's out there, and that uses C++, but they're both fairly the same. They're 3D engines. You load in your objects, and then you define out parameters and interact, how things collide together and all of that. So here in Unity, we have a box. You can see the wireframe around it. And you have a thing called a collider. If 2 objects, let's say you have 2 balls in space, if they hit each other, they're going to smack against each other and they're going to bounce away like you're making a billiards game. Those are colliders. They use physics. If you take an object and you turn it into a trigger, if you turn that collider into a trigger, like this cube is, it's invisible and it's more of just a zone. And you can see as the thing comes in, it's counting the amount of time, the number of frames that the ball is in the zone, and then it comes out. So it gets up to 199, and as it rolls out, then you'll see it change. So those triggers are used to kick off scripts to do other things. If an arrow hits the person takes damage. If the ball hits the other ball, they both bounce back. Now, some of the actions like physics bouncing doesn't really require much on the programmer's standpoint. The physics is already built into it. But as an interaction designer, you have to think about what that is. If I'm touching a button or pushing, I need to collide with it and it has to move in so far. Once it moves into a certain point, it hits an invisible area that I can then say button is pressed, ring the doorbell now, play the doorbell sound. So that's the key thing with all of this stuff in the game engine or 3D engine. Unity was they were both started as game engines, but now they're being used for applications. So they try to just call them 3D engines at this point. But triggers and colliders are a big part of how you build interactions between items. And you could have it like, if the ball comes into this space, it plays a sound, but if a cube falls into it, it doesn't do anything. So now you're doing if-then logic based on the item that's in there. So that can get pretty complex pretty quickly. When we have objects and we're clicking on them, I'm just pressing my finger in the air. I don't know what I'm doing, right? I can't feel anything. I'm wearing a headset, so I'm literally blind to the real world, and I'm waving my fingers in the air. So how do we know we're touching something? And it's similar to how we do it with websites, with an application design for mobile devices. You have if you're doing 2D, you would have an untouched state, a mouse over state, a click state, and an active. So untouched is the button. Mouse over would be when you touch the button, or if you have a raycast that comes across it, it highlights it. The click state would be the pushing down. And then the active state is maybe it changes color, like a caps lock key could turn on a light or something to let you know that it's on. In a skeuomorphic design of 3D, you're going to model the actual button. And then when you push, the button is going to compress. When you let go, it's going to spring back up, and then maybe it lights up or does something else. So yes, you're actually modeling to the key level if you're building a keyboard in a virtual space. It seems crazy. It seems like a lot of work. In the beginning, it's a little bit tough. Spring joints are if any of my students are reading in the comments, they can attest to this. Spring joints are a nightmare. There are tricks to do stuff instead of that, but overall, you can always fake things with a script and not have it be a true physics joint. But you have to think about how that interaction happens. But then again, if you're a product designer and you're building an actual like Logitech keyboard, you work for Logitech, you would be thinking about what that feel is of that keyboard. How springy is it? People love mechanical keyboards because they have really hard springs in them, versus laptop keys, which are so shallow. So you're thinking about a lot more in the design and in the interaction. This is the user experience. All of these little things add up. And if it doesn't feel right or there's lag to it, it just feels off, and it kind of breaks the immersion. Another way to give you feedback would be audio. So as I press that button in midair, I see it push in and I hear a beep sound. So now I know that I actually did something. And the same thing with websites and things. So if you don't have sound, sometimes it's hard to know what's going on if you actually clicked it. If you're ever in like a gas station and it's loud and you're pressing the keys, if you don't hear the sounds, sometimes you wonder if it is actually taking when you're using those membrane keyboards, because they don't actually flex at all. So you need some other, you need to see it on screen and you need to hear it to know what's happening. So we use a thing called spatial sound, which is sound that's mapped or pinned in 3D space. So if you're standing in front of a piano and you're pressing a key and you close your eyes and you keep pressing that key and you turn your head to the left, you hear that sound transfer from both ears to the right ear. And then when you look back, you hear it come back again. That sound is pinned out in front of you, and as you move, the sound moves around. So breaking that into a headset, into your audio headset, you have to kind of shift that sound back and forth. Luckily, all of that stuff is figured out within those game engines. So all you have to do is place that sound in 3D space, and it'll take care of all of the reflections and ambience and all that. And as you turn, all the way the volume works. But that's going to aid in your interactions so that you hear that click, or as I'm clicking, I turn my head, but I still hear it to the right. And I know that it was over there is where that happened. This is the cool one. This is still future. I mean, some stuff is out there, but not a lot. But the last step would be haptic feedback, which is a physical sense of touch. It'd be vibration in controllers or force feedback. If you remember the old gaming steering wheels and joysticks, you'd hit something and you'd feel that joystick kind of vibrate. And sometimes it would make it harder to turn it in one direction or the other. Same with the joystick if you're playing a flight game. That was haptic feedback in a very simple form. On the VR side of things, we're looking at stuff, like the game controllers, the Oculus controller. It has a little vibrator thing in it, just like your phone does. So it will buzz and you'll feel it. But then you have things like haptics, which are gloves with resistance. So these cables that are over the top are making it harder for you to bend your hands. I think it's pushing air into it, but I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it adds resistance as you close your hands. Meta, which is Oculus, and Facebook, keep changing their name. They're doing a similar thing, but they have air bladders in the palm of the hand. So as you run your hand over an object, you'll feel that sensation on your fingers as you go across this. I'm talking about all of this, which feels like it's not part of UX, but it's a new form of UX because you have to think about the experience and how does it feel when I pick that object up. I pick up a glass in my hand, I feel that pressure on the inside of my fingers, I feel the weight pushing down, so it's actually stronger on my top finger than it is on the lower fingers. We're going to have to start reimagining how we design, because it's adding a lot of new stuff to it. I don't have a picture of it, but Haptics makes a suit that you wear, and if you get hit in spots, you'll feel it. So again, you have to think about, do I want to have that interaction of a zombie hitting me from behind, or if I'm picking up something and the box slides towards me, do I feel it hit me in the chest as I'm carrying it? And then I know I'm actually not balanced because I could be leaning back too far. And then one of the coolest ones is Ultraleap Stratos is an little mini ultrasound sensors that are beaming straight up. And as you put your hand over where those beams form, you can actually feel an object in space. It's not blowing air, it's doing it with ultrasound, but it's the same kind of idea, but you feel an object. That could be used for like a seated experience, but that wouldn't work if you're walking around in a VR arcade or something, because this has to be on the floor or something nearby. So that leads to safety. As UX designers, we have an obligation for the safety and well-being of users. You have to make sure that you have a minimum safe play area. You need to define that. You need to put that in your specs. And if you're conveying that to a user through this application or this game requires 3 feet by 5 feet or something, they need to know that so they're not in too tight a space. And you want to also avoid weird physical motions like hyperextending your elbow. If you were to swing a tennis racket, you know what that feels like. But if I replace a tennis racket with a hammer and you swing like that, your wrist, your elbow, and your shoulder are probably going to get messed up over time. This is where I see a lot of people working in VR fitness trying to add ankle weights or resistance bands to give them a better workout, but it can put you into weird positions as you turn your body. And I'm working on a VR fitness application. I'll be consulting with some physical therapists to ensure that the range of motion is safe because they've seen it all and they know what's going to cause it. Panic and fright, be clear with your game descriptions. If there's jump scares or falling, let people know that. I don't like scary haunted house type experiences. I mean, I'll play zombie games and all that, but I do not like things like, Five Nights at Freddy's, where the thing just hunts you down and scares you. I don't find that fun. That's just too stressful. I like VR for fun. And then is this a standard seated or laying down experience? Or lying down experience. Let people know how they're going to play this so that they, if it's a scary game and you're standing, there's a good chance you're going to run square into the wall. And will there be XR-induced PTSD in the future? Most definitely. As haptic feedback comes into play, eye tracking, they have respiration sensors that can measure your heart rate and how, like galvanic skin response. They're adding smell. I think you're going to get into some, a zombie game is going to smell and feel gory, and that's going to mess people up. So we have to think about that. So again, as UX designers, we have an obligation to make these people safe when they're using our experiences. And also, you don't want a lawsuit. So for comfort, for safety and comfort, where you place your menus is very important. You can see here in this Oculus Quest menu, it shows up along the horizon. You have a nice big view. You can see everything. This is using hand tracking, but it points this little pointer out so they can still select. It's moving this dot up here as they move their hand. This old experience was a 3 degree of freedom ViewMaster where you put your iPhone in it. You would scan these little ViewMaster discs that had a QR code pattern that would open up to an AR to a VR application. You could explore different areas and scenes. There's a lot of panoramics in 3D and stuff like that. But the menu is on the floor. I always used this standing up, and I was like, why do I have to look at the floor? I'm going to fall over. This is the dumbest experience. I just found this old photo the other day of it, and I'm like, oh, they're sitting on the couch using it, so they're just glancing at a coffee table. They're not looking straight down. So totally fine for a seated experience, horrible for a standing experience because you have to look down to select a menu, or if you had to look up and select a menu. You need to keep that at a neutral plane of where they are, and that's where the main, whatever the normal area when it opens up, that's where you'd want those interfaces to be. And when you bring the menu up, you want to make sure that it's in front of the person. Don't open the menu behind me. That's useless. I don't know what's going on. Things that would obviously offset that would be if it's a skeuomorphic design and you have, say, a TV or a monitor and you have an interface showing up on that. Yeah, that's going to be wherever it is because it's in the physical space. But if I'm clicking like an option button and pulling up a menu, that should be wherever I happen to be looking. If I'm facing the wall, I'm standing in the corner facing the wall, the menu should come up in front of me and I should be able to interact with it. It shouldn't pop up behind me because I wouldn't know to look there. And there's always exceptions to this. If you're in like a flight simulator and there's buttons up top, that you still need to interact with those. But if you hit options, that should not be where it is. It should open up in front of out at a neutral plane. You may have to track where the person's head is or what they're looking at to make that comfortable. You could pin it so when they move, it stays with them no matter where they go. That gets a little bit weird though. I feel like it needs to be in the environment and stay in the environment, not as a heads-up display. And you have to be aware of the field of view on headsets. So the Quest is the most popular headset right now, and it's only 104 degrees view. Pimax and Star VR are over 200 degrees. They use two LCD screens, one for each eye, where all the others are using a single plane LCD split in half to do it. So that's why they're more affordable with one screen versus two, but you lose a lot of your field of view. So keeping that in mind, you're drawing from your person, you're drawing a field of view angle out on either side of 104 degrees, and you want to keep all of your interface probably less than that. Now, if you're working with a Pimax, you might be able to go wider, but usually you're trying to support multiple devices, so you're going to have to look at your lowest common denominator here. And even 104 is fairly wide. You might want it only to be 90. In this shot here, you can see how wide the screen is. You may want to, from this distance, it's fine, but if you're up closer, these could break off on either side of the screen. So there, what you're looking at is you shouldn't have to pan your head back and forth. And if it is wider, think about when you have a phone and you have a scroller. I don't want to say a carousel because we all know carousels are horrible, but you might have a bunch of photos and you can scroll horizontally to see them. If two photos that have a space between them align to the edge of the phone by default, people won't know to scroll. You always want to have a little hinting of the next one on the edge, and that makes it easier for people to understand, oh, there's more going in that direction or the other. So if you have an interface and it only goes to here, if it broke right at this line, you may not know that there's more outside of there, but if it breaks partially on the friends list and you over here with something, you're going to have a better chance of glancing over. Also in VR, your head's always kind of moving around, so you would see a little bit wider on that. But again, you don't want to be in the front row of the movie theater where you have to go back and forth and up and down to see everything. You want to kind of be in that sweet spot in the movie theater. That's where you want everybody to kind of look at everything from. VR headsets are heavy. All that weight on the headset is sitting in the front. There's nothing back here. It's all right here. This just gets really heavy over time. Now, this is a third-party headset, so it actually has a battery that snaps on the back that's designed to be the same weight as the front to balance it out. But that's not Oculus's design. That's a third-party company. So you've got to think about how long people can use a device and what's the fatigue going to be for them. And again, this is still user experience because how long can they use it? How long are they going to be able to take it before they just say, the hell with it, I'm not going to do this anymore. Battery life is roughly 1.5 hours for a wireless headset. So there's a hard limit that you have on an interaction or on an experience, and maybe people's devices aren't fully charged, so you have to even think about it being shorter. If they are tethered back to a computer, now you have cables that could get in the way. So if your Beat Saber is kind of hands out in front, but if Beat Saber was above and behind, people that are tethered that have it running up to the ceiling and back to their computer, they'd be karate chopping those cables left and right. So you have to think about what that device is and what's going on, and think about those limitations when building your applications. On the AR side, holding a phone out in front of you is annoying and tiring too after a while. I couldn't imagine walking through like Disney World doing a full AR experience for the whole day in the park, just holding a tablet out in front of me. That wouldn't be fun. And on the AR glasses, a lot of them are tethered. So the Magic Leap looks cool, but there's a cable running down her back and coming down to this little side purse thing here. Maybe it's going down under the back of her jacket, which means that that can snag her head as she turns. So yeah, some of these pictures can be misleading, but there are cables and things, and you need to be aware of what that device is using all the time. And you'll have to adjust your interactions accordingly. If there's too much pull or you can't spin around because you're going to get snagged in the wires, you may have to adjust how your how your user is going to be behaving in that experience. You don't want to have stuff that forces them to spin around a lot. Grounding the users in 3D space. This is really cool and interesting, and we've all been there. If you've ever gone in a corn maze or been lost somewhere, usually it's because everything looks the same. And in a 3D environment, we reuse the same geometry and shapes over and over, so everything tends to look the same. So you can reuse an object because obviously it's going to save, memory and everything, but repeating the geometry, you don't want to have like this cloned out SimCity type environment because it's very confusing. You don't know what you're looking at. You want to break it up with unique items. And if you look at like, if you come off an elevator in a hospital, all the floors are the same. So they'll put signs up, but they usually put a unique painting up like, oh, this floor has the water lilies on it. It helps you get grounded to know where you are in that building. And for those of you in Boston, you've probably all been to the aquarium and you've been to the Harbor Garage across the street. They use 5 identifiers. They have numbers, colors, the names of the sea creatures, photos of the sea creatures, and then the braille on the buttons. So that's really driving home what's going on. And I'm sure when you step off the elevator, they probably paint some color there too, as well. By the way, I don't like that they used white because white on orange and blue, it's just not readable. So they got really high marks on getting all of that, and then they failed right there on the font color. But those kind of things are going to make it unique. Oh yeah, like what's the old thing? If we get lost in the amusement park, meet at the big flagpole at the beginning of the park because it's unique. You know where it is. You see the flag. You know to go there, and hopefully, you can find your family again. So in VR, you don't want to get lost. You want to make it easy because you're building a mental map. You're standing in a room, but you're in this maze or whatever in your virtual world. So you need to kind of build that mental map to know what's going on. And light and shadow is another point for grounding the user. Without it, it looks like old video games from the 90s. It just looks very flat and weird. With the shadows and reflections and light and stuff like that, it kind of builds the whole environment together and feels more realistic. And I think your brain kind of really absorbs that more because it's like real life, and then it makes you help you remember. If you do have a floating menu, though, adding a drop shadow or some kind of shadow on the ground with correct lighting does make it feel like it's really in the scene. But in AR, that's more difficult because it's hard to detect where the sun is and then put those fake shadows in. I think they're getting better at it with some of the newer applications out there, probably Eighth Wall and Niantic, which just merged. They're like the leaders in a lot of the web AR stuff. So cues are another way of grounding users. If something was to appear behind me for whatever reason, let's say in VR, how would I know it's back there? So I could have a flash of light that through the field of view, I can kind of see the light glowing on the side of the hallway to know, oh, something just appeared behind me. Let me turn around. I see that flash of light. So you're using that cue to kind of hint to tell them to turn around. Another way would be using audio. So ambisonic audio is 4 channels at least. There's also a second, I think it's called second order, which is 9 channels, but it's got 4 microphones in it, and it gives you full spatial sound. When it's played back, it's called binaural audio because it's delivered to the 2 headphones to your 2 ears. That's used, like I said earlier, if you're playing that piano and you turn your head right or left, you know where that's coming from. So in our cue example, not only is there that flash of light, but now I hear a beeping sound. And as I turn, that beeping kind of moves in front, and now it's in front of me. So it helps steer me in that environment. So I'm grounded and I know where things are coming from. These are all important in order to kind of direct a person to where they need to go. And I'll get into there's one more reason for that with sickness, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, we want to get through, everyone is different. We're all different heights. We don't want to set a menu at a fixed height off the floor, because if I'm 6 feet tall and you're 4 feet tall, where does that menu go? If I give it a 5 foot, default, the short person looks up and the tall person has to look down. So why not just have it pop open at my eye level, or what's comfortable for me? Or why don't I have the ability to adjust that height in my settings? I don't see very many options in applications to do that right now. I think people are pushing fast to just design, and they're kind of cutting all of our usability common sense that we've had for the last 20 years in UX, and they're just kind of like forgetting about it. But we need to bring that back in. I want to see a lot more accessibility and usability applied into applications. Standing versus seated versus lying down. When you're lying down, you're facing the ceiling, not the wall. So your viewport has to be adjusted because the gyro still thinks down is down. This happened to me with the Oculus Go, the old 3 degrees of freedom device. I loaded up Netflix. I'm like, cool, I can lay in bed and watch a movie. I can just lay back on my pillow and watch a movie. Nope. I started the movie, I laid down, and I looked at the ceiling in the 3D space because it was still on the wall, and there was no way for me to rotate that whole view 90 degrees. I believe they fixed that now, and a lot of the players can do it for that very reason. A lot of people that are in hospitals and stuff are bedridden. They use VR to escape from to escape reality and kind of relax, and it is nice. So being aware of that is nice if you can adjust that experience. Now, it may not work for, say, a training application or simulator. You don't want to just turn the whole world 90 degrees because your real world physics is not going to match in game if everything is twisted. But if you're just watching a movie and you darken the room, let that screen go up onto the ceiling. And then if I'm seated at a desk or a table, what happens if I lean forward to see something closer? I could smack the monitor. Or if I've done this in applications, I've actually want to put something on the desk in the virtual scene, and I've dropped it on the floor. And when I go to bend over to pick it up off the floor, I hit my headset on the desk because I didn't clear it because it's sticking out a few inches off my face. So you have to think about where people are going to be using your application and what are those literal blockers that could affect that, like hitting that. Also, if you drop your controller, since the controller has the LED ring on it, if it's below the table, the camera can't see it, and now you lose the controller and it floats all over the place in 3D space until it can track on it again. So it'll break the immersion or possibly screw up the application. So you have to think about all of those places like, oh, we're going to make a training simulator and everybody's going to sit at a desk and use it. Okay, then you need to test it at that space and think about what are the issues that could harm somebody along the way. This one gets a bit crazy. So play space, we all have different size spaces. My office is probably 3 feet by 5 feet of clear space that I can use. Other people have, say, a large garage that's 20 feet or something. And they can just walk around and do whatever. So you have to think about the space and define that in your application and let people know what it is. What is the minimum space required? And there are also some applications that let you define that space. You can walk around and map your space, and then it kind of makes the world fit within your space. That's much more complicated to do, but it's pretty neat. This is the stuff that blows my mind. There's a way to do infinite walking by redirecting a user's by way of eye tracking in a headset that turns the viewer's space slightly when I have to read the term here. It detects saccadic suppression and redirects the user during the resulting temporary blindness. So apparently in our eyes, when we blink and look around, our eye buffers and holds the last frame for a moment while it's moving. And then when it stops moving, it refreshes to the new frame. And in that moment when it's twitching, we're looking at a buffered image. So you can then take the VR and twist it slightly, and then you can trick somebody to think they're walking in a straight line, but you're actually curving them so they don't hit the wall. That's I don't know, that's next level. That blows me away. I have no idea how they figured that out or got that working. Apparently it's got to work really well or you're still going to go square into a wall, but that's crazy. Which gets even crazier is non-Euclidean geometry. So this is non-Euclidean. You can see there's a square, but as it moves, it's like a fisheye. So as he walks in a square in this scene, he's actually not walking in a square. He's walking in like almost like a pentagon. I mean, so you can steer people around differently in these weird skewed spaces. So it's distorted, but it's like righted back to normal views for the person in the headset. I put the links in there on these because these are ones you want to go read about. I can't really do it justice explaining it, but it's crazy stuff. And this is all because we're in small places. We don't all have the luxury of a 20 by 20 room or a 40 by 40 or bigger, or a warehouse. So all of that leads to VR sickness and how to mitigate it. And this is huge. We've probably all, if you've ever used VR, you've probably gotten sick at some point. I see online all the time, they just say deal with it. You just have to get your VR legs. No, that's unacceptable. Make your application accommodate for people. People could have inner ear infections. They could be older. They could just have bad balance. There's a lot of different things that could go into it. Not everybody's like solid 18-year-old that can skateboard and backflip and everything else, and it's no big deal. You know, that's not the real life situation out there. So you want to be inclusive to all age groups. Ways that you can reduce VR sickness is to make sure that your design is optimized for the target headsets that you're going to be using. On a mobile device, it's using a mobile processor. So the Oculus Quest is actually an Android. So it's got a lot less power than my PC. So I have to think about that when I'm building an application. I can't just put in a gazillion objects and hope that it's going to run okay. It's going to run so slow. This actually happened to me. I had an application, it wasn't running that well, and I've never really gotten sick from latency. But after playing for like 5 minutes testing it, I started to feel sick because everything lagged when I'd move my hand. And after about, I think it's like 12 to 15 frames per second, your brain starts to disconnect and then you just start to get sick and you have to take it off. And then it lasted for like an hour. And I usually don't get sick for that long from VR, but it really messed me up. So you want to be aware of what that is and try to optimize. You don't have to be really tight on your optimization in the beginning, but you have to think about that. And I know that I'm getting more into like development of VR, but these are all things that are important when you're building out a user experience. You have to think about all of this stuff. It's not just fonts and buttons and colors. There's all of these other layers of how, we have latency in regular pages, hits a server, comes back. How long does that take? What if it's over like half a second, people bail off Amazon? It's like they already have all the metrics behind it. But now, instead of bailing off Amazon, they're getting sick. So you want to, and then they're going to take the headset off and not play your application or your game. Low frame rate, lag and delay, that'll mess you up. The interactions just need to be fast. If they're slow, they also just don't, and this is a very abstract concept, they don't feel good. I can't really explain it. You have to try different applications to understand. A fast interaction feels good, a slow one doesn't. And I don't know what that sweet spot is. It's like you have to just go in and tweak it based on what you're building. I know I'm very abstract on these. I'm not giving you real concrete numbers or answers on anything, but it's not a one size fits all. These are just overall terms to help you, but it all depends on what your application is. And a lot of it has to do with the amount of geometry in it. Moving your camera. If you force a camera turn, you will make somebody sick. It's like pulling the rug out from under their feet. Instead of that, you have to let them naturally turn their head to the side. Use those cues we talked about earlier with the light, sound, maybe a narration saying, hey, look behind you. Something to have them, to force them to look to one side or the other is necessary. And you can find out what they're looking at even without eye tracking by just using field of view. You can kind of know where they're looking. Obviously, I'm looking at my screen. I'm not looking behind me. I know that much. So if something happens back here, I can say, turn around and look. So as you build interactions, think about what the person could be doing. People can be distracted. It's not as fixed as, say, a 2D game. Even in a 3D game, there's a lot, like Call of Duty, they always do that nail to the rail where they get to a point where they force the action and you just follow along like you're on a funhouse ride shooting targets. It's not really the same experience, but they're controlling that. You would never want to do that in VR. It would just make people sick because they'd start moving all of a sudden without initiating that. Teleport movement is a good way to reduce sickness. So instead of walking, you can teleport, arch over to a spot, and then appear. If you do a quick fade out and fade in, it's not jarring of just jumping forward, and that can help people. Snap turning is good. So as you're looking right or left, some people get really dizzy from that. A snap turn will turn you 45 degrees with your joystick, and that will make it a bit easier. Plus, if you get into a small space, you can quickly turn around real fast without physically moving. Tunneling is really cool. This is Google Earth. If you've ever tried this in VR, this is one of the best experiences out there. Um, but you can get sick pretty fast when it's the wide view as you fly around. So they have the ability to turn on and off tunneling, which kind of just reduces the peripheral vision down to the smaller spot, and it eliminates it. And I have an example that you can all try. So watch these signs right here. Look how fast they're going down the road, right? Crazy. Now, what if we didn't have the peripheral view? Doesn't feel like it's going as fast with those signs. And if you don't believe me, stare at the middle of the screen. And now, look at that. Actually, let me do it here, and I'll cut back. It feels like you're going much faster than you should be on ice. And that's because of the wide field of view of that camera on the dash cam. So just by reducing that down a little bit, you can eliminate that experience. And that's what Google's doing here with Google Earth. So tunneling is very powerful. There's actually a free app for Unity that you can implement, and it works really well. But again, allow the user to turn on and off those options as necessary. I believe in putting in lots of options for people to tweak things, but don't assume, make sure there's ways for them to get in there and do it on their own. Don't think everybody gets sick and needs it, but don't think nobody gets sick and doesn't need it. I think it all needs to be there with options. So how can we make our apps accessible? So I'm just gonna check the time here. We can have them standing, sitting, or lying down. So can the app be experienced in any position? Can you accommodate for people in a wheelchair, sitting or stationary? They're not going to be able to move forward in the wheelchair, but they can still interact with stuff. Beat Saber, you don't move; you just move your hands. But if you're in a Super Hot or one of these games, some of them you actually have to walk forward. I think Super Hot you don't; it goes on its own. But there are games that would have you physically walk forward, or maybe you could teleport. So you have to think about how that can be done. VR is a great escape, especially for people who are bedridden. They can lay on their back and they can be on a beach in Hawaii just enjoying the waves and forget that they're stuck in a hospital for the next 10 days while their leg heals or something. So there's really cool uses for it, and it actually works well for pain mitigation too. The distraction of VR has actually helped in pain, sometimes better than using opioids and things like that for like burn victims. They'll play like a slow, like a cold scene with wind blowing and a lot of ice, and it actually makes people feel better that are like suffering from burns. I know that's a little bit of an aside, but it shows you the power of VR to be used for healing, mental healing in a way, or distracting them from the pain. I just find that fascinating. I love the whole medical side of VR. I think that's an area that I've always been passionate about. So controllers, what's the ability to switch between controllers or play one-handed? I play a game called In Death Unchained. It's an archery game. So your left hand's holding the bow, right hand is pulling back. You can only switch hands in the menu. Once you're in the game, and the game can go for a long time, you can't switch hands, and my shoulder starts hurting after a while. All I want to do is switch and do some left-handed shots for a while. They don't allow that ability. Why not? So those are things to think about. Can you remap the controls? What if somebody has one hand and then all the buttons that would be on the left hand, I need to remap to the right? Is there any way to do that? Or if you have limited arm movement, can you control it with your arms at your side? These are all things we have to think about. I know we're not going to be able to solve everything all at once, but you need to look at your target audience, but also be more inclusive of other people to understand, how that would work. One-handed is probably not out of the ordinary. And plus people could break controllers. You might just lose a controller or something. And then on audio, can we do any kind of closed captioning or descriptive audio and text? I found this great one by this guy, Paul Mealy. He posted this up a few weeks ago on LinkedIn. He's doing an AR app that's in real time, capturing his voice, translating it, pinning it on the person. And as you move around, it stays stuck on him. And he said the reason was for people who had limited hearing or no hearing, and with wearing masks from COVID, they can't see their mouths to kind of help them with reading lips or just seeing what they're saying. So this was a way to just kind of have like a literal floating real live captions in front of somebody as they're talking. I think that's brilliant. I'd love to see more of that. And once we get to AR glasses, that's going to be very useful. So could we make a VR app for a visually impaired person? Somebody who's blind. Can you make a VR blind app? The answer is yes. We know that the headset can do measure all the sensors, same as a smartphone. We know how your head is oriented in turning. We know where the headset is in 3D space from the cameras, and we know what where the controllers are from all of that tracking. So we could build an application, no visual. You could shoot raycasts at the objects that describe you're facing towards a coffee shop that's 50 feet away. There's people sitting outside at tables drinking. You could have haptic feedback as you're sweeping the controller. It vibrates when it reaches something and then does a description. And then as you walk forward with the controls, you'd play the sound of steps so that people know how close they're getting so they can kind of judge that space. You could use the descriptive audio, as in what was going on here, and then spatial audio to ground the user. So you hear people laughing to the right, you hear a dog barking to the left. You could build out an entire app and not ever build anything visual for output. Obviously, you would build it in the scene so that you could map it all out. But to the end user, they can be blind and still use an app. And that's VR. That is still VR, even though they're not seeing it. So, all right, we're at the end here. What should you as UXers learn? You definitely should be taking some classes. You should be learning about design and/or development. The engines that are being used for XR are 3D engines, Unity and Unreal. C# is used in Unity, C++ is used in Unreal. Doesn't mean you need to learn all of this. I'm just kind of giving you the landscape here. The skills that you would need are workflow maps, storyboarding, and interaction design are definitely key ones. Hardware to be hardware that you should have is probably a VR headset, a smart device with some sort of AR capability, and then eventually an AR headset. Right now, I think like an Oculus Quest is the best way to go. It's like $199. It can do pass-through. It can get you most of the way there. It's a good, affordable thing to learn on before you jump onto something expensive that's $2,000 or $3,000. Optional skills to learn about would be maybe 3D modeling or photogrammetry, which is taking pictures of objects from all sides and mapping it into a 3D object. Some sound design to understand how that works. Maybe how to interact with haptics. Multiplayer and networking or sensor integration for health and fitness, like Bluetooth trackers for cadence and heart rate and all of that. You don't need all of this, but having an understanding of a little bit of each of these things will go a long way, because you're building the interaction, you're the designer. But if you know a little bit about how multiplayer works, that'll adjust your design to make sure that when you're building a lobby, oh, I need to show what the latency is, or I need to do this, or I need to be able to enter and leave the lobby or drop people or whatever. So these are kind of the areas to look into. It doesn't mean you have to be an expert in all of it, but take a look at some of these different things. And these are definitely optional. There's a lot here I want to learn, and I still haven't learned it all. But XR is the future. In AR, we're going to see it go mainstream in the next 18 months or so, I'd say. Apple's got a device coming. I think they're going to do VR before AR, but there's some cool AR devices coming out that are going to be more of the glasses or sunglasses, heads-up displays that can actually map and keep things in, not just Google glasses with text, but actually an object floating in space. Eye tracking is coming in a lot of the headsets. Mouth tracking, that's what this is here. It faces your mouth, and when you speak, it makes your avatar speak. You combine eye tracking, which is cameras watching your eyes, with mouth tracking, and now I can map my face and put it on an avatar. That's great for social apps. Oculus is doing speech recognition. It's time to learn how to build audio interfaces. A few people who have worked with any of the smart home devices like Siri and Google and all that stuff, they're already aware of it. But for the rest of us, that's an area we need to learn about. And then body tracking. We're going to finally have legs, no more floating torsos. They'll have cameras facing down that can look at your legs, or in the case of Oculus, they're talking about putting cameras on the controllers looking back at you. So they'll be able to track where your legs are. So we need to learn about audio interfaces. We need to learn about hand gestures. These are all new. We're just used to point and click, right? Or touch your finger on a thing and slide. We have to learn these other interactions as well as 3D space interactions. So future's coming. We might as well jump into it. Thank you. I know I've rambled for a while, but there's a lot going on in this world of XR, and I want to see UX be a big part of it.
That was great. Thank you so much, Kirk. I have so many questions. So if anyone has questions or comments, feel free to start dropping them in the chat. We have a couple minutes. And I'll jump in with my first question. So if someone from tonight is interested in just getting started learning about this, are there some resources that you suggest checking out?
Yeah, there's a lot of YouTube channels out there, and there's a lot of XR. There's a lot of like AR specific and VR specific websites that you can Google. There are classes out there. If anybody has any questions about that stuff, reach out to me. I can, from my website, kirkmembry.com, I can point you in some directions on that. I did used to work at one of the schools, so I mean, obviously that's one that I'm passionate about.
Yep.
But I heard, Udacity, somebody was here from there. I actually took a course from there a few years ago on VR. But yeah, there's quite a bit of stuff out there, and there's more that needs to be done. I'm pushing to build some UX resources for XR. I think it's a space that's lacking right now. And I think we have a lot of like engineers building stuff because they know how to do it, but they're not, as we know from engineers building websites, right? They spit data to the screen as it's stored in the database, and that's not what we want to see. So I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm seeing a lot of like shortcuts and things that could be done a lot better. And they're not done because it's hard. It's always hard to be accessible and usable. There's more to think through. But if we do that, the application is that much better. The successful apps on any of the app stores, they're usable. If they weren't, they wouldn't be number one. So we need to really just like look at that and how can we retool some of these things to make them better.
Norman has a question. Is there a reason why VR hasn't improved the focus of objects from highlighting the actionable object with a bright outline color versus blurring the rest of the environment and keeping the actionable object focused? It's a quite involved question. So
yeah, so sometimes, I mean, you can highlight objects. I did that in an early project because it was like, okay, pick this object up and move it over here. So it highlights the object and it trains you. I think in training, that's fine because you're trying to teach the person what the object is. You see this a lot with people taking kids into the grocery store, pick up the soup, put it in the cart. But after a while, it's just like, get the soup, right? And they have to figure it out. So you're kind of going like teaching the toddler, working your way up through. And I think VR is kind of the same thing. There's a time to educate, and then there's a time to just let them go play in the sandbox and figure it out.
Nate has a good question. Are there any designer-friendly spatial UX design tools that you've used that you'd recommend for people who aren't developers?
Shapes XR was kind of cool. It's still a bit rough. They're working on it, but it's a neat way to kind of position objects in 3D space, and you can export out your scenes. It's kind of like PowerPoint, VR PowerPoint. You can like assemble stuff. You can't really animate or build clickable things. You build a slide, and then you can duplicate it and modify it. But you can export that out into Unity and then, go from there if you wanted to. But it's no different than any of the rapid prototyping tools for UX. You don't really want to use that for your source code. It's like a good test, and then you want to start over again. But in the VR space, because you are positioning things in 3D, it can be hard to do that again, to start over. So just bringing them in can help you know where that position is between you and the car and the house and the door. Load in that rough model and then bring in new models in and put them over and delete the old stuff out. So it just helps that way. And Microsoft has Microsoft Maquette, which is a much more robust version of that. I played around with it when I was mentoring some students, but I didn't think it was going to be good for them. So we ended up using Shapes XR. These were kids from like 12 to 16, and they were able to build out stuff no problem in a couple of weeks. Actually comping up within a day or two, and then obviously adjusting their ideas. Microsoft Maquette's a little bit more complex, but I think it has a lot more interactive capability. But being able to take that and then bring it into a game engine is important, because what's the point? Like, I found a thing that can take Adobe XD files and bring them into Unity. So you can actually build out your 2D interfaces and then export and bring them in. It's like a good baseline to get going, so you're not starting from scratch.
Then Erica asks, thoughts about UX VR researchers? Is that a thing?
It is a thing.
How do we become them? Because that sounds really fun.
Well, I'm doing a little bit of it myself. I have some projects that I'm working on, building out a inexpensive product for people if they don't have a UX team to do like walkthroughs and stuff like that with like heuristic analysis and kind of like a mini usability test. But overall, with some of the newer headsets having eye tracking, you're going to get juicy metrics off that, right away. So once you have eye tracking, I mean, everything you do with a headset and a controller, all of those bits and pieces of data can be recorded. So if let's say you're teaching somebody to unload boxes off a pallet and they're doing it wrong, you actually have the data to show that they're doing it wrong, and then see if they've improved over weeks. Or if you're doing a physical fitness, like a physical therapy, you could have somebody walk and then walk again and walk again. And then you can like map all that and see if their gait is getting better and stronger and they're not limping or rocking side to side. You can figure that out. So on the UX research side, there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm not a UX researcher, so that's not really a strong point for me. So I don't have a lot of knowledge there, but there is stuff there. You can record what people are doing and get that extra data, and you can just record the screen and see what they're doing. So in that sense, it is just like regular UX research, watching them do a task.
And James, Kirk, I've got sort of a philosophical question I'd like to ask relating to temporal relativity and your thoughts on our responsibilities as designers in this regard. If you can come up.
I'm not sure what temporal relativity is. So.
Good sign. Come on through, James.
James, come on down.
I knew I was going to be in for a treat with this talk tonight, so I had to throw you a curveball. So I've been reading this interesting set of principles that a colleague of mine has come up with called the Universal Principles of Design for Bodies and Time. And there's this topic that he discusses called temporal relativity, and it's the association of our personal temporality, both literal and cultural, to the worlds in which we inhabit. And so you can think about it as, when listening to a new tune on the radio, why do you begin to tap your toe to that beat already? Why do you know that the beat is twice as fast or twice as slow? And what I'm trying to drive at here is that, the world that we know through our experience is actually just some micro version of this infinite full world. And as we are engaging in the design process of creating this, duplicate world, and more people are living more and more of their lives in these experiences, how do you think about the responsibility that you have as a designer to make sure that they are seeing the world outside of this VR, AR, XR experience in a way that is not negatively impacted by all the time that they've spent in their VR experience? Super rambly question.
Yeah, but I mean, we see it already from the internet, right? Like you got all the trolls. Everybody will mouth off online, but would they do the same in a bar when somebody can lean across the table? So I think I'm scared by the whole, I hate the term metaverse. That whole, I was trying to avoid talking about that quite a bit, but metaverse, the concept is neat of everything is connected and there's all this interoperability, but then all the corporations ran with it, and Disney's not going to interface with, Fox. They don't like them, so are they ever going to let Simpsons characters run around in Disney World in VR? No, they don't want that. So they're all closing down into their own systems. So I think you do have a responsibility for behavior and trying to make things good. A prime example is all of the sexist behavior online and social VR. There's just a lot of harassment, and it's sickening. It's an area that I don't like. I don't like social VR. I don't like to go into those spaces because it's people screaming, it's animes and furries and all this weird stuff, and people just making rude gestures and following you around and harassing you. They don't know if you're male or female. It doesn't really matter. They're just harassing people. If they think you're female, it's even worse. And that really upsets me because these companies say that they care, and I'm not seeing them do anything about it. Microsoft, not Microsoft, Facebook, Meta, whatever, they keep changing their names, so they have different excuses for it. But, they're saying the metaverse is the next big thing. Well, then, clean your house, take care of it. And they're not doing that because you need a way to make a bubble and keep people away from you. When I get into business social VR, it's amazing. If we took this whole thing and went into VR right now with it, we would have great discussions because we're not trolls to each other. We're going to have a real conversation. But when you just let the whole world in, you get all the garbage that comes with it. And I don't see, as much as we all want free speech and everything, you need ways to lock things down because nobody needs that. And in real life, yes, you would be checked for your behavior, right? That's how it goes. But we've all been hiding behind our computers for 2 years now. So
if I could just add one more anecdote.
Sure.
I think of the way that people of a certain generation tend to look at younger folks and say, why do you need to have your maps app open all the time when you're driving, even though you're going somewhere you need to go, or why you always need to check your texts or your Instagram feed. These behaviors that are so ingrained in the experience of being, you know, a person born into this digital world.
Oh yeah, I can't remember phone numbers anymore. You know?
Exactly. And so my question is, if we create the norm where everyone has some sort of heads up display that they see through an augmented reality experience day to day, how do we make them not freak out when they have to take the glasses off?
Well, yeah, that comes down to like the technology addiction. And the beauty of AR glasses is you can just take them off. And then like if all billboards went digital, I just take the headset off, right? Like you don't have to look at them. You know, I don't use the internet on my phone because the web browsers, you can't block everything. And it's the internet is garbage without ad blockers. It's literal garbage. Try using Safari where you can't put anything on it. It is like next to impossible to do. And everything is popping up left and right. And you've probably seen that VR app or that AR app where there's like all the ads, almost like Blade Runner meets advertising. That's the future I don't want. That's the future all the people touting about the metaverse want, but that's not what I want. You know, I think there's a balance. Like I like to go out hike, but I bring a digital camera and I bring a GPS, but I also have a map and I understand what I'm doing. You know, I think about if technology fails, and I think it's that balance. People that, you know, they say, you know, no more screen time for their kids and they have them read a book or something. I think that's valid. You need to have that. But you know, not knowing how to do directions without a map. I mean, there's probably stuff that we don't know from the 1800s anymore. You know, none of us can shoe a horse, but that back then, that was probably everybody knew how to do that because that was your tire, right? You had to fix your tires on your car. Your horse was your car. So there are things we'll forget about. You know, are we becoming more helpless? Yeah, I think so. I know this is getting very philosophical here.
Let's leave it at that. We don't need to go any further. Thank you.
But yeah, like I said, with the whole, like, we have a responsibility as designers for the safety and well-being. If you think your apps are going to be used in a bad way, then fix them, make them better. You know, if you get hired by a company, they're going to do something really crappy and you don't like it, then don't work for them. You know, voice your opinion. If you don't like it, walk away. Like I wouldn't work for a company that's doing that. I won't work for any gambling company. I don't want to support that. You know, it's just not something I'm interested in. So yeah, there's a lot there. Let's say, let's go. Let's shift to something a little more positive here.
Yeah, we have time for one question. All right, two. I like both questions. How ripe is the XR market for UX designers? Is there a large enough demand? Is it growing or shrinking?
It's growing. It's definitely growing. Every year, the whole industry is growing. Developers are needed, but developers need somebody. They need a designer alongside them to actually make the app, right? They can't always come up with the ideas. I come up with the ideas and I'm like, damn, I need a whole team just to like figure this stuff out. I know what I want to do. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the market is definitely getting huge. And I meant to have a slide in here about some of the VR and AR job boards that are out there, but I can follow up with that and I can post it. Maybe we can put it up on the site. Yeah.
And then Anil says, Kirk, any industry leader book or content that you admire in this field of UX of XR? No books in general, but I follow a ton of people on LinkedIn. I started following people on Twitter, but I kind of stopped using Twitter a long time ago, so that doesn't work. But LinkedIn I'm on because I like that guy that did the AR captions. He posted that like 3 weeks ago online, so it came through on my feed. So I'm finding a lot of cool stuff if you start following some bigger people in the industry. Or just search on LinkedIn for like UX or AR, you'll start to find some stuff, and there's a lot of cool stuff out there. It's also a very small industry. You can talk to almost CEOs of companies. You know, it's not like the rest of the world where, you know, they're so far down and removed. If you're doing something cool or they're doing something cool, they want to share it and they want to talk about it. And, you know, when we can all go to conferences again and talk to people, you'll run into a lot of people. I'll probably meet a bunch of you if the next conference I go to, whatever that is. Please soon. I'm going to drop my LinkedIn in the chat, and any resources that we gather, I'll post out all over the place that we can.
That's too bright.
And yeah, I think we covered all the questions. Yeah. Kirk, thank you so much for your time. This was such a fascinating talk, and I really enjoyed learning about all
Yeah,
these opportunities.
I know I talked a lot. There's a lot going on. I was just trying to give you guys a high level of everything happening and what the different areas are. Like I said, you can't really do specifics because everybody's building such a different application.
Right.
You know, if you're building an actual like spaceship simulator to go to Mars, that's very different than the person working on the oil rig. But there could be similar things, you know, like how do you do repairs and stuff like that. But yeah, it is such a huge field because you're literally reinventing everything now in a virtual space.
I think it's so exciting, and this was a really great opportunity for everyone to learn that breadth of it, and then now we can find the parts that are extra interesting and dive deeper. So I think everyone got a lot out of this. I'm just going to share my screen to show everyone our next meeting for. All right, so our next meeting is Thursday, April 21st. Jesse Rogers from Wayfair will be joining us to talk about crafting a story to create change in your organization. Right. And thank you again, Kirk, for joining us this evening. This was probably one of my favorite chats we've had with this group, and I learned so much. And
you're all welcome. You're all welcome to reach out to me too if you have questions about anything. I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I mean, I've only been in the VR space like 4 years officially, but I've been involved in it much longer than that. I've been interested in this stuff forever. My first headset I wore was in 1995, so I go way back on it.
Hey, Tara.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from any of you if you have any ideas or whatever. Hey, Tara.
Hey, I've been here the whole time. I just haven't said anything. It's nice to see you again, Kirk. It's been a while.
Yes, it has.
Excellent. And what's the best way for people to reach out, Kirk, if they want to stay in touch, learn some more?
Kirkmembry.com, and then you can send me a message on there or go to LinkedIn.
Perfect.
You can send me an email at kirk@kirkmembry.com. That works too.
Excellent. I think your fan club was in full force and it is growing this evening. So
there we go. Cool.
Excellent. Thank you everyone for joining us. Had so much fun learning with all of you, and hope to see you at another event in the future. And we will have this video up on YouTube in a couple days so you can share with all your friends. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Okay.